What would you do if doctors with fancy degrees dismissed you as just a maid, but you held the key to saving a billionaire's life? Have you ever been in a room where everyone treated you like you were invisible? Where your voice didn't matter because of your job title or background? Where people looked right through you, assuming you had nothing valuable to contribute? This is a story of how one woman's quiet observations exposed medical incompetence at the highest levels of society. And her revenge? It wasn't what anyone expected. Stay with me. This gets absolutely incredible. Meet Nia Harris. 26 years old, determined, and carrying the weight of her family's future on her shoulders. When she stepped through the towering iron gates of the Wentworth estate for the first time, she wasn't just starting a new job as a maid. She was entering a world that would test every ounce of her strength, intelligence, and dignity. The Wentworth mansion stood like a fortress of privilege, its marble columns reaching toward the sky, as if declaring the family's superiority to the world. Inside those walls lived Charles Wentworth Sr., a man whose business empire had shaped entire industries, whose name commanded respect in boardrooms across the nation. But Nia wasn't intimidated by the crystal chandeliers or the priceless artwork lining the hallways. She had siblings depending on her, younger brothers and sisters who needed food on the table, school supplies, and someone who believed in their potential. More than that, she carried a dream that burned bright despite every obstacle life had thrown her way. Becoming a nurse, healing people, making a real difference in the world. If you've ever felt underestimated because of where you come from or what job you hold, hit that like button. This story is for you. What Nia couldn't have known as she tied her apron strings that first morning was how her careful attention to detail, her genuine care for others, and her sharp mind would soon put her on a collision course with some of the most arrogant medical professionals money could buy. The Wentworth family doctors, men with degrees from prestigious universities, with letters after their names that opened doors and commanded automatic respect. They walked those marble halls like kings, their white coats armor against any suggestion that they might be wrong about anything. They saw Nia and others like her as furniture, useful for cleaning and serving, but certainly not capable of independent thought. They had no idea they were about to meet their match in the most unexpected way possible. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who sees everything. Charles Wentworth Sr. didn't just own businesses. He owned entire industries. At 73, he still commanded board meetings with the force of a man half his age. His word could make or break careers. His investments could reshape entire cities. The Wentworth name appeared on hospital wings, university buildings, and charity foundations across the country. But wealth, as Nia would soon discover, couldn't buy everything. The family employed a team of 3 personal physicians, Dr. Marcus Wellington, Dr. Richard Ashford, and Dr. Victoria Pembroke. These weren't your typical family doctors. Each one held degrees from Harvard Medical School, had practiced at prestigious hospitals, and charged fees that could fund a small clinic for a year. Dr. Wellington, the lead physician, carried himself with the swagger of a man who'd never been questioned. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suits custom-tailored, and his confidence absolute. He'd been treating wealthy family for 30 years and believed his reputation spoke louder than any diagnosis. Dr. Ashford, younger but equally arrogant, treated the mansion like his personal kingdom. He graduated top of his class and never let anyone forget it. His medical bag was more expensive than most people's cars, and he wielded his stethoscope like a scepter. Dr. Pembroke, the only woman on the team, had broken glass ceilings in her field but had adopted the same dismissive attitude toward lesser people. She spoke in medical jargon even during casual conversations, as if reminding everyone of her intellectual superiority. From Nia's very first week, the hierarchy became crystal clear. The doctors barely acknowledged her existence when she entered rooms to clean. When they did notice her, it was with a kind of condescending smile you'd get a child who'd wandered into an adult conversation. "Careful with that medical equipment, dear," Dr. Wellington said one morning as Nia dusted around his examination tools. "I'm sure you don't understand how delicate these instruments are." Nia bit her tongue and continued cleaning. She understood plenty more than they knew. Before taking this job, she'd worked at a community health clinic, assisting nurses and learning everything she could about patient care. She'd seen more genuine medical emergencies in 1 month there than these doctors probably saw in a year of treating wealthy clients with imaginary ailments. The mockery started small. Snide comments about her cute little uniform. Jokes about whether she could read the labels on the medicine bottles correctly. Conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered, followed by barely concealed laughter. "I bet she thinks aspirin and acetaminophen are the same thing," Dr. Ashford whispered to his colleagues one afternoon, not bothering to lower his voice much. "Well, what do you expect from someone who probably didn't finish high school?" Dr. Pembroke replied, her tone dripping with false sympathy. What they didn't know was that Nia had not only finished high school, but had completed 2 years of pre-nursing courses before financial pressures forced her to drop out. She understood their medical terminology, recognized symptoms they discussed, and often caught details they missed entirely. Drop a comment if you've ever had someone doubt your intelligence based on your appearance or job. Nia's story is about to show why that's always a dangerous mistake. But the real conflict wasn't just about respect. It was about Charles Wentworth Sr.'s health, which had begun to decline in ways that baffled his expensive medical team. It started with fatigue that Dr. Wellington dismissed as natural aging. Then came the occasional confusion that Dr. Ashford attributed to stress from business pressures. The tremors in his hands were explained away as mild arthritis by Dr. Pembroke. Nia, however, noticed patterns the doctors missed entirely. She saw how Mr. Wentworth's confusion seemed worse after certain meals. She observed that his tremors increased during specific times of day. She noted his skin color changes that occurred in correlation with his medication schedule. Most importantly, she noticed his symptoms were progressively getting worse despite the doctor's confident assurances that everything was under control. During her cleaning rounds, Nia would find Mr. Wentworth staring out windows with a vacant expression that hadn't been there months before. She'd discover him in his study, having forgotten why he'd come in. Once, she found him trying on his shoes on the wrong feet, frustrated and embarrassed. The doctors, meanwhile, continued their routine visits, checking standard vital signs, prescribing mild medications for minor complaints, and collecting their substantial fees. They treated his family's concerns with patronizing reassurance. "Charles is in excellent health for a man his age," Dr. Wellington would announce after each visit. "A few minor adjustments to his medication, perhaps a bit more rest, and he'll be fine." But Nia could see what they refused to acknowledge. Charles Wentworth Sr. was not fine. He was getting worse, and his high-priced medical team was either too proud, too careless, or too comfortable to admit they might be missing something significant. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose just how dangerous it could be when qualified credentials met willful ignorance, and how a dismissed maid would become the most important person in that mansion. While the doctors continued their arrogant rounds, collecting paychecks for incompetence, Nia began her own quiet investigation. She couldn't confront them directly. She needed this job too desperately. But she could do something they'd never expect from just a maid. She could think like the nurse she was training to become. Every morning at 5 a.m., before her official duties began, Nia started keeping detailed notes. Not in some fancy medical journal, but in a simple composition notebook she bought with her own money. She documented everything. What Mr. Wentworth ate when his symptoms appeared, how long they lasted, what medications he'd taken, and most importantly, what the doctors had dismissed as unimportant. Day 1, tremors worse after breakfast. Confusion lasted 20 minutes after morning pills. Doctors didn't ask about either. Day 5, skin pale yellow tint. Complained of stomach pain. Dr. Wellington said it's acid reflux without running tests. Day 12, found him lost in his own hallway. Took 5 minutes to remember where his bedroom was. Doctors blamed old age again. The pattern was becoming clearer to Nia, but she needed more than observations. She needed knowledge. After 14-hour workdays that left her exhausted, Nia would walk to the public library 3 miles from a mansion. She'd research medical conditions, cross-reference symptoms, and study diagnostic procedures on the library's old computers. The librarian, Mrs. Rodriguez, began staying late just to help Nia access medical journals and databases. "You're really serious about this nursing dream, aren't you?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked one evening. "It's not a dream anymore," Nia replied, her eyes focused on a medical article about neurological symptoms. "It's becoming a necessity." But Nia didn't stop at library research. She reached out to former colleagues from the community clinic, where she'd worked before taking the Wentworth job. Maria Santos, a nurse practitioner she'd assisted, agreed to meet Nia for coffee and listen to the symptoms she'd observed. "This doesn't sound like normal aging," Maria said, reviewing Nia's careful notes. "These symptoms together, there are several conditions this could indicate. Have they run any comprehensive blood work? Brain scans? Toxicology screens?" "They've done basic blood panels," Nia replied. "But Dr. Wellington keeps saying everything looks perfectly normal for his age." Maria shook her head. "Normal doesn't explain progressive confusion, tremors, and color changes. Someone needs to look deeper." That conversation lit a fire under Nia. She began volunteering at the free clinic on Sundays, her only day off. She told the Wentworths she attended church, which was entirely untrue. The clinic felt like a sacred place where people were healed regardless of their bank accounts. Dr. James Chun, who ran the clinic, noticed Nia's exceptional attention to detail and her intuitive understanding of patient care. "You have natural diagnostic instincts," he told her after she'd helped identify a serious condition that might have been missed. "Have you considered accelerating your nursing education? There are programs for people with your experience and aptitude." Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the doctor's arrogance was reaching dangerous new levels. "I don't understand why the family keeps asking so many questions," Dr. Asher complained to his colleagues. "We're the medical professionals here. They should trust our expertise." "The staff has been particularly bothersome lately," Dr. Pembroke added. "That cleaning girl keeps hovering whenever we're examining Charles, as if she could possibly understand what we're discussing." Dr. Wellington nodded. "Perhaps we should speak to Mrs. Wentworth about maintaining proper boundaries. The help shouldn't be so present during medical consultations." What they didn't realize was that Nia's hovering was actually careful observation of their sloppy examination techniques, their rush assessments, and their failure to ask the right questions. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, because Nia's quiet strength was about to challenge everything these doctors thought they knew. One afternoon, while the doctors held their weekly consultation in the mansion's library, Nia was dusting nearby shelves. She overheard Dr. Wellington discussing Mr. Wentworth's latest test results. "Blood chemistry is still within normal ranges," he announced confidently. "The family's concerns are unfounded. Charles is experiencing typical age-related decline. Nothing more." But Nia had seen those same test results when she'd emptied the trash from the medical office. She'd studied similar lab reports during her clinic volunteer work. The numbers might be technically normal, but they showed subtle patterns that warranted deeper investigation. Patterns the doctors were either too proud or too lazy to pursue. That evening, Nia made a decision that would change everything. She approached Charles Wentworth Sr. during one of his clearer moments. "Mr. Wentworth," she said gently, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but how are you feeling lately?" "Really feeling?" His eyes focused on her with surprising clarity. "Terrible, if I'm being honest. But the doctors keep telling me I'm fine. Sometimes I wonder if I'm losing my mind." "You're not losing your mind," Nia said firmly. "Your concerns are valid. Have the doctors asked about your family's medical history? About any medications you might have taken in the past? About environmental exposures from your business dealings?" Charles looked surprised. No, they haven't asked about any of that. Do you think it matters?" "I think everything matters when someone's health is at stake." That conversation planted a seed that would soon grow into the doctor's worst nightmare. Mr. Wentworth began asking more pointed questions during his medical visits. He started requesting copies of his test results. He began documenting his own symptoms and bringing lists to appointments. The doctors were annoyed by their patient's sudden hypochondria, never suspecting that a maid had empowered him to advocate for himself. As Charles Wentworth Sr.'s condition continued to worsen despite the doctor's assurances, the family's faith in their expensive medical team began to waver. And Nia? She was quietly becoming the most knowledgeable person in that mansion about the patriarch's true condition. The stage was set for a medical emergency that would expose a dangerous gap between credentials and competence, and prove that sometimes the most important voice in the room belongs to the person everyone else ignores. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday when everything changed. Nia was finishing her late-night cleaning in the mansion's east wing when she heard the crash. Not the gentle sound of something falling, but the heavy, terrifying thud of a human body hitting marble floor. She dropped her cleaning supplies and ran toward the sound, her heart pounding. In the main hallway, she found Charles Wentworth Sr. collapsed at the bottom of the grand staircase, his body convulsing, his eyes rolled back, foam coming from his mouth. "Help!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the mansion. "Someone call 911. Within minutes, the household was in chaos. Mrs. Wentworth appeared in her nightgown, sobbing. The adult children rushed downstairs. Security guards called emergency services. And through it all, Charles Sr. continued seizing, his body jerking violently against the cold floor. Dr. Wellington arrived first, still in his pajamas, but carrying his medical bag with the same arrogance he always displayed. He knelt beside Charles, checking his pulse, looking into his eyes with a penlight. "It's clearly a stroke," he announced with complete confidence. At his age, with his stress levels, this was inevitable. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately." Dr. Ashford and Dr. Pembroke arrived within minutes of each other. They huddled around their patient, speaking in hushed medical terms, nodding sagely at Dr. Wellington's stroke diagnosis. But something was wrong. Nia had seen strokes during her volunteer work at the clinic. This wasn't matching the typical presentation. The convulsions were too rhythmic, too specific. The foam was too thick. And most telling of all, Charles's pupils were reacting to light in a way that didn't fit Wellington's confident diagnosis. "Doctor," Nia said quietly, approaching the group, "I don't think." "Not now," Dr. Wellington snapped without even looking at her. "This is a medical emergency. Please step back." The paramedics arrived and began loading Charles onto a stretcher. Dr. Wellington briefed them with absolute authority. 73-year-old male, apparent stroke, no significant medical history, vitals stable but neurological compromise evident. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Nia made a decision that would haunt her if she was wrong, and vindicate her if she was right. "Dr. Wellington," she said, stepping forward despite his dismissive glare, "you need to test for heavy metal poisoning." The entire room went silent. The paramedics paused. The family stared. The doctors looked at her like she'd just claimed the earth was flat. "Excuse me?" Dr. Wellington's voice was ice cold. "Heavy metal poisoning," Nia repeated, her voice stronger now. "I've been documenting his symptoms for months. The progressive confusion, the tremors, the color changes in his skin, the timing with his meals and medications. This isn't a stroke. The convulsions, the specific type of seizure activity, it all points to acute heavy metal toxicity." Dr. Ashford actually laughed. "Are you seriously trying to diagnose a medical condition? You're a maid." "I'm someone who's been paying attention when you weren't," Nia shot back, her patience finally breaking. "When did you last check his mercury levels? His lead levels? When did you ask about his medications interacting with each other? When did you consider that his symptoms have been building systematically rather than appearing suddenly?" Dr. Pembroke stepped forward. "This is completely inappropriate. You have no medical training, no authority to—" "I have eyes," Nia interrupted, "and I've been using them while you've been collecting paychecks for guesswork." The tension in the room was explosive. Mrs. Wentworth looked between the doctors and Nia, confusion and desperation warring in her expression. "What are you suggesting?" she asked Nia directly. "I'm suggesting that before they treat him for a stroke he didn't have, they should run a comprehensive toxicology panel. Specifically test for heavy metals. If I'm wrong, you've lost 30 minutes. If they're wrong, they could kill him with stroke medications that will make heavy metal poisoning worse." Dr. Wellington's face was red with fury. "This is outrageous. I will not have my professional judgment questioned by domestic staff. Charles needs immediate stroke intervention, and every minute we waste on this nonsense increases his risk of permanent brain damage." But something in Nia's certainty gave Mrs. Wentworth pause. How? How can you be so sure? Nia pulled out her worn composition notebook. Because I've been documenting everything for 3 months. His symptoms follow a pattern that heavy metal poisoning creates. The tremors worsen exactly 4 hours after he takes his morning supplements. His confusion peaks 6 hours after dinner. His skin discoloration correlates directly with his medication schedule. And look, she opened to a page covered in careful handwriting and crude charts. 2 weeks ago, he had a mild episode that lasted exactly 47 minutes. It followed the same progression as tonight, just less severe. That's not how strokes work. That's how systematic poisoning works. The paramedic team leader, a veteran with 20 years of emergency experience, looked intrigued despite himself. What specific metals are you thinking? Based on the symptom cluster and progression, I'd guess mercury or lead, possibly both. But the key is getting the blood work done before they start stroke protocols that could interfere with accurate testing. Dr. Wellington was furious. I will not be lectured on medical care by someone who probably can't even pronounce half the medications this man takes. Levothyroxine, metformin, lisinopril, atorvastatin, and the multivitamin supplement that I suspect is contaminated, Nia said calmly, plus the herbal supplements Dr. Pembroke prescribed that aren't FDA regulated. Want me to continue? The room went dead quiet. Hit subscribe if you believe in the power of quiet strength, because what happened next would shock everyone in that mansion. Mrs. Wentworth looked at her husband, convulsing on the stretcher, then at the 3 doctors who'd been treating him for months without improvement, then at the maid who just demonstrated more detailed knowledge of his case than the people being paid thousands of dollars to care for him. Run the test, she said firmly. Margaret, you cannot be serious, Dr. Wellington protested. Run the heavy metal test, she repeated, her voice growing stronger. Now, before any stroke treatment begins. The lead paramedic nodded. Ma'am, we can draw blood for toxicology at the hospital before beginning any treatment protocols. It's actually standard procedure in cases of unexplained seizures. Dr. Ashford looked incredulous. You're going to delay critical stroke intervention based on the theories of a house cleaner? I'm going to make sure we know what we're treating before we start treating it, Mrs. Wentworth replied. Then she looked directly at Nia. You're coming with us to the hospital. That's completely irregular, Dr. Pembroke objected. So is ignoring someone who clearly knows more about my husband's condition than his paid physicians. Mrs. Wentworth snapped back. As they loaded Charles into the ambulance, Nia climbed in beside him, her notebook clutched in her hands. The 3 doctors followed in their luxury cars, their confidence shaken for the first time in their careers. The 40-minute drive to the hospital felt like the longest night of Nia's life. Everything she'd observed, everything she'd learned, everything she'd risked by speaking up. It all came down to the results of a blood test that would either vindicate her months of careful observation or destroy any credibility she'd hoped to build. But as she watched Charles Wentworth's vital signs on the ambulance monitors, she felt something she'd never experienced before. Absolute certainty that she was right, and that being right might just save a man's life. The doctors, meanwhile, were about to face the most humiliating night of their professional careers. The emergency room at Presbyterian Medical Center became ground zero for the most humiliating professional collapse any of those doctors had ever experienced. At 4:23 a.m., Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the ER attending physician, approached the waiting area where Nia sat beside Mrs. Wentworth, still clutching her notebook. The 3 family doctors stood in a separate corner, their earlier confidence replaced by nervous tension. Mrs. Wentworth, Dr. Walsh said, her expression serious. The toxicology results are back. The room held its breath. Your husband has dangerously elevated levels of mercury in his bloodstream. The levels are consistent with chronic poisoning over several months, with acute elevation in the past 48 hours. Without immediate chelation therapy, this could have been fatal. The silence was deafening. Mrs. Wentworth gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Nia felt a mixture of vindication and horror. She'd been right, but Charles had been suffering for months while the doctors dismissed his symptoms. Dr. Wellington stepped forward, his face pale. That's impossible. We've been monitoring his health closely. His blood work showed. His blood work showed exactly what it should show if no one was testing for heavy metals. Dr. Walsh interrupted, her tone professional but sharp. Standard panels don't include toxicology screens unless specifically ordered. Who requested this test? Mrs. Wentworth looked at Nia. She did. Our maid. She insisted something was wrong. Dr. Walsh's eyebrows rose slightly. She turned to look at Nia with new respect. What made you suspect heavy metal poisoning? Nia opened her notebook, her hand steadier than she'd expected. The symptoms followed a specific pattern. Progressive neurological decline, tremors that worsen after meals, skin discoloration, and most importantly, the timing. His confusion episodes always peaked 6 hours after dinner and 4 hours after his morning supplements. That timing pattern is classic for mercury absorption, Dr. Walsh confirmed. Most physicians wouldn't catch that unless they were specifically looking for it. What's your medical background? I'm studying to become a nurse. I volunteer at the free clinic on weekends. Dr. Walsh nodded approvingly. Well, your observations likely saved this man's life. We're starting chelation therapy immediately, and with early intervention, he should make a full recovery. The 3 family doctors stood frozen, the weight of their failures settling over them like a heavy blanket. Months of dismissing symptoms, months of collecting substantial fees for inadequate care, months of treating their patients' valid concerns as hypochondria. But the story didn't end in that hospital room. By morning, word had begun to spread through the interconnected world of high society medicine. Dr. Chun from the free clinic, where Nia volunteered, received a call from Dr. Walsh detailing the case. He was astounded but not surprised by Nia's diagnostic insight. She's been asking incredibly sophisticated questions during our volunteer sessions, he told the hospital's medical director. Questions about symptom correlation, medication interactions, environmental toxin exposure. I suspected she had exceptional aptitude, but this proves it. The medical director, Dr. Robert Martinez, was intrigued. Cases where non-physicians made critical diagnoses that stumped trained doctors were rare enough to warrant attention. He requested a full case review. Within days, the story reached medical colleagues throughout the city's hospital network. A maid had diagnosed heavy metal poisoning that 3 expensive private physicians had missed entirely. The Wentworth family, meanwhile, faced their own reckoning. Charles Sr., recovering steadily with proper treatment, was furious when he learned how long his symptoms had been ignored. Months, he said weakly from his hospital bed. I told them something was seriously wrong for months, and they kept telling me it was normal aging. If Nia hadn't spoken up, Mrs. Wentworth completed the sentence he couldn't finish. You could have died. The source of the mercury poisoning was traced to contaminated herbal supplements that Dr. Pembroke had recommended. Expensive, unregulated pills from a company that had failed to test for heavy metal contamination. The very physician who'd mocked Nia's intelligence had been slowly poisoning her patient with her careless recommendations. News of the incident began reaching beyond medical circles. The Wentworth family social circle buzzed with the story of how their prestigious physicians had been outsmarted by the help. Country club conversations turned to questions about whether expensive medical care was actually better medical care. Dr. Wellington, Dr. Ashford, and Dr. Pembroke faced professional humiliation unlike anything they'd experienced. Their competence was questioned publicly. Other wealthy families began asking uncomfortable questions about their own medical care. Medical review boards opened investigations. Insurance companies requested documentation. Professional relationships that had taken decades to build began crumbling overnight. But perhaps the most devastating blow was the simplest one. Charles Wentworth Sr., recovering his strength and clarity of mind, fired all 3 doctors immediately. I'm replacing you with physicians who understand that listening to patients and the people who care for them is more important than protecting their egos, he announced from his hospital bed. The once arrogant Dr. Wellington tried one last desperate plea. Charles, surely you can't blame us for not identifying such an unusual condition. I don't blame you for missing the diagnosis, Charles interrupted, his voice growing stronger with each word. I blame you for dismissing the person who made it. I blame you for months of arrogance when you should have been investigating. And I blame you for treating someone with more insight than all of you combined like she was invisible. As news of the incident spread through social media and local news outlets, it became more than just a medical story. It became a powerful reminder that wisdom and intelligence don't always come with expensive degrees and fancy titles. And Nia, she was about to discover that her quiet courage had opened doors she never could have expected. 3 weeks after Charles Wentworth Sr. returned home from a hospital, completely recovered and sharper than he'd been in months, an unexpected visitor arrived at the mansion. Dr. Patricia Williams, Dean of Nursing at Jefferson Medical University, had driven 2 hours specifically to meet Nia Harris. "I've reviewed your case study," she told Nia as they sat in the mansion sunroom. "Dr. Martinez at Presbyterian shared your documentation methods, your diagnostic reasoning, and the outcome. In 30 years of medical education, I've rarely seen such sophisticated clinical thinking from someone without formal training." Nia listened quietly, still processing everything that had happened since that terrifying night when she challenged 3 physicians and won. "I'm here to make you an offer," Dr. Williams continued. "The Morrison Foundation, they provide educational scholarships for exceptional candidates in healthcare, has agreed to fund your nursing education completely. Full tuition, books, living expenses, everything." The room fell silent, except for the quiet ticking of an antique clock. Nia felt tears building in her eyes, but these were different from the tears she'd shed during months of being dismissed and mocked. These were tears of possibility. "There's more," Dr. Williams added with a smile. "Charles Wentworth has personally committed to matching the Morrison Foundation support. He's also arranged for you to work part-time at his company's medical research division while you complete your studies. You'll have real-world experience in clinical research, diagnostic analysis, and patient advocacy." Nia's hands trembled as she absorbed the magnitude of what was being offered. Everything she'd dreamed of, everything she'd sacrificed for, everything she'd worked toward while being treated like she was invisible. It was all suddenly within reach. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Charles Wentworth, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. "Because you saved my life when people with far more credentials couldn't. Because you showed grace under pressure when others showed only arrogance. And because the world needs more healthcare providers who actually care about their patients." The news of Nia's scholarship spread quickly through the mansion staff. Maria, the head housekeeper who'd worked there for 15 years, hugged Nia with tears streaming down her face. "You did it, Mija," she whispered. "You showed them all that we're not invisible. We matter. Our minds matter." But the transformation wasn't just about Nia. The entire household culture began to shift in ways no one had expected. Charles Wentworth instituted new policies. All staff members who want to pursue education would receive support from a family foundation. Weekly meetings were established where any employee could voice concerns or suggestions about household operations. The invisible hierarchy that had kept people like Nia silent began to crumble. Mrs. Wentworth, still shaken by how close she'd come to losing her husband due to medical negligence, became an advocate for patient rights and healthcare accountability. She joined the board of 3 nonprofit organizations focused on improving medical care for underserved communities. The mansion's new physicians, carefully selected for their commitment to thorough, humble patient care, made a point to listen to observations from anyone who spent time with their patients. They understood that healing was a team effort, not a solo performance by someone with a medical degree. 6 months later, Nia walked into her first day of nursing school with confidence she'd never felt before. Her classmates had already heard about the student who diagnosed heavy metal poisoning that stumped 3 doctors. Instead of intimidation, she felt respect. Her professor, Dr. Angela Torres, introduced her to the class. "This is Nia Harris. She's here because she proved that exceptional clinical thinking can come from anywhere. She's also here to remind all of us that the most important tool in healthcare isn't our stethoscope or our medical knowledge. It's our willingness to truly listen." During her first clinical rotation, when a senior physician dismissed her observation about a patient's symptoms, Nia didn't shrink back as she might have months earlier. "Doctor," she said politely but firmly, "I respectfully think we should consider other possibilities before making that diagnosis." This time, instead of mockery, she received attention. Her suggestion led to additional testing that revealed a serious condition the initial assessment had missed. Word of Nia's continued diagnostic successes spread through the hospital. She wasn't just a nursing student anymore. She was Nia Harris, the woman who'd proven that intelligence, observation skills, and genuine care for patients could overcome any amount of institutional arrogance. Her younger siblings watched their sister's transformation with pride and inspiration. Her brother Marcus decided to pursue pre-med studies. Her sister Keisha applied for a scholarship in healthcare administration. Nia's courage had given her entire family permission to dream bigger. The mansion that had once felt like a fortress of privilege became something different under Charles Wentworth's leadership, a place where everyone's voice mattered, where potential was recognized regardless of job titles, and where the lesson Nia had taught them was practiced daily. Never underestimate the person others ignore. Today, 3 years later, registered nurse Nia Harris walks the halls of Jefferson Medical Center with the same quiet confidence she showed that night when she challenged 3 arrogant doctors and saved a billionaire's life. But her story didn't end with personal success. Nia has become a powerful advocate for what she calls invisible voices in healthcare, the janitors, aides, family members, and support staff who often notice critical details that busy physicians miss. She's established a program called Every Voice Matters that trains healthcare workers at all levels to document observations and speak up when they see something concerning. The program has been adopted by 12 hospitals across 3 states, and it's already credited with catching dozens of misdiagnoses and preventing countless medical errors. Charles Wentworth Sr., now fully recovered and sharper than ever, serves on the program's advisory board. Nia taught me that wisdom doesn't come with a price tag, he says. The person scrubbing floors might be the one who saved your life. The 3 doctors who dismissed her? Dr. Wellington lost his medical license after a review board found a pattern of negligent care. Dr. Ashford relocated to another state, his reputation permanently damaged. Dr. Pembroke now works at a community clinic, where she's learning the humility that wealth and privilege had never taught her. But Nia doesn't dwell on their downfall. She's too busy proving every day that intelligence, compassion, and careful observation are more valuable than any credential hanging on a wall. Her story reminds us that breakthrough moments often come from the most unexpected sources, that the person everyone overlooks might be the one with the answers everyone needs. That quiet strength and persistent dignity can topple the tallest towers of arrogance. Most importantly, Nia's story proves that your voice matters, regardless of your job title, your background, or how others choose to see you. So here's my question for you. What voice in your life needs to be heard? What observation are you holding back because you think others won't listen? What truth are you afraid to speak because someone might dismiss you? Share this story with someone who's been underestimated, someone who needs to remember that their insights matter, someone who deserves to know that being overlooked doesn't mean being powerless. Subscribe for more stories of quiet heroes who changed everything by refusing to stay silent. Your comment can inspire the next person who needs the courage to speak up when it matters most. Because sometimes the most important voice in the room belongs to the person everyone else ignores. And that person might just be you.